Welcome back. Now, Pat Buchanan, he was a senior advisor, of course, to Presidents Nixon, Ford and Reagan, original host of Crossfire, and he ran for the Republican nomination in 92 and 96, I think it was. He co-founded the American Conservative. He's an author, television commentator. Well, you know him, and he joins me now from Washington, D.C. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, we'll get to the president a bit later, but let's talk about what I assume is still your party, the Republican Party. You did run as a reform candidate, but we think of the days of Reagan or Nixon and some of the great leaders of the past, and when I look at the party now, I have to say, no one there really inspires me.
Well, I think that's a feeling of an awful lot of Americans, which is why you see so much of a sort of waiting for Godot sense on the Tea Party right every time someone comes along, whether it's Sarah Palin or Herman Cain or Rick Perry. There's a sudden rush to him as though this is the savior, this is the Messiah. And it falls short each time. But I think, Michael, your sentiment is probably shared by an awful lot of Republicans. But eventually, and I think probably pretty soon, they're going to have to reconcile themselves to the candidacy, very probably, of Mitt Romney.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Huh. But he is a man who, in a way, he could have run for the Democrats to a degree, couldn't he? At least on the right of the Democrat Party. Is he a traditional conservative?
Well, he was not a traditional conservative, certainly up in Massachusetts. He was very much on social and cultural and moral issues a liberal. He was to the left of Teddy Kennedy, he said, on a number of those issues. And he was not considered a conservative. And, of course, he imposed an individual mandate in his health care program, so he was clearly not a conservative. But he is running clearly right now as a conservative in the Republican primaries. There's great skepticism over whether he is authentically one. But I have to tell you, Michael, if they don't beat him, if he wins Iowa, this election, this nomination process will be over, because he will win Iowa and New Hampshire, and there will be no one left, even if they beat him in South Carolina, who will have the legs, and by that I mean the money and the recognition and the support to sustain a 50-state campaign.
What will the traditional conservatives, the Tea Party types and others, will they actually work for this man in an election? Obviously, they don't want Obama, but could they actually have the heart and the gut to get out there and work for him?
That would be one of the real problems. It was the problem with John McCain, and the problem with Gerald Ford, and the problem with Bob Dole is that the base of the party, socially conservative, morally conservative, culturally conservative, Tea Party conservative, they really were not energized and motivated to get out and work for the candidate the way they should have and could have. And that's the problem Mitt Romney would face. I think if he gets the nomination, he will have to move to the right with his vice presidential nominee and pick someone who will energize the base of that party. Now, Michael, let's go back to 2008. I was out in Denver when Barack Obama was nominated, and he was 8 points ahead. He had a great speech at his convention. And there was no way McCain could win that election. He was 8 points down. He's not a charismatic candidate. He picked Sarah Palin. And now, while she's very controversial now, when he picked her, for the 2 weeks following, the social conservatives and the Tea Party right, if you will, came back to the McCain ticket to the point that he was 5 points ahead of Barack Obama when suddenly the Lehman Brothers collapse hit. And that shows you what can happen if you fire up and energize that base. And that's the way the Republicans can win this election. A second thing that'll bring the Tea Party back, frankly, is the enormous antipathy, bordering on real hostility to President Obama on the American right today. I mean, when you go south to that evangelical community, you can say, look, you may not like this Mormon fellow Mitt Romney, and if you don't like him that much, you can have Barack Obama for 4 more years.
Let's talk about the Mormon aspect, because if that doesn't really have any resonance in this country, in Canada, anyone who has a particular Christian faith in Canada will probably be suspicious to a lot of the voters. But we just can't empathize with anti-Mormon feeling. That's tangible in the States. That could really be a problem for him.
It's a real problem, I think, for Mitt Romney. Herman Cain, the African-American candidate, says he doesn't think the South will vote for Mitt Romney because he's a Mormon. And the state to look at, Michael, is South Carolina. Very strongly evangelical and remains so, and they're very skeptical of Mormons. I ran down there as a Catholic, for example, in the South, and when I beat Phil Gramm in Louisiana, I beat him in the south of Louisiana, which is heavily Catholic and in the Cajun country, but where I campaigned hardest, which was in the north, and there I lost to him. So there's a real sort of skepticism, and there's some old borderline hostility towards Mormons and Catholics in the Deep South, the evangelical South. There's no question about it.
So I assume that means that his vice presidential running mate would have to be an evangelical.
No, I don't think so. He would have to be a conservative. And I think they will vote, the South will vote for a conservative, traditionalist conservative on the ticket. I think if, for example, that Mitt Romney would pick a Rick Santorum, I don't know that he will, and I don't think he will, unless it were clear Santorum could bring his home state of Pennsylvania. I think they would accept that, and I think, frankly, the South will vote or would vote for Mitt Romney if he's the nominee. But I think one of the main reasons is that that Obama is such an unacceptable alternative to the South. Did you know that in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, if you take the white vote in 2008, John McCain got over 85% of it. So there's a lot of, racial, cultural, ethnic, religious issues here that are still, they're not as powerful as they used to be, but they still cannot be ignored.
Mm-hmm. Pat, stay with us. When we come back, I want to ask you about President Barack Obama. Peace be upon him. Back in a few moments. Thank you. Okay, Pat Buchanan for a second segment. Fascinating man. I understand there are many people who disapprove of him, but you couldn't care less. You get this from right and left in the middle. You disagree with someone, so they should be silenced. That's the most appalling thing. No, let people speak. And I actually agree with a great deal, if not most, if not all, of what Pat Buchanan has to say. Let's talk about your president. Thank the Lord you've got him as a president and not us, President Barack Obama. But is he as bad as many conservatives say? Is he really such a bad leader of your country?
Well, personally, I like the president as an individual. I think he's a good family man. I think he means well. But he is a very, very weak leader, unquestionably. And they should have known that when you have someone who in the Illinois legislature votes present over 100 times, that's not a real leader. And in the office that he's been in, I think the president has deferred very early on to the Congress, Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. I don't think he understands the economy, and I think he defers to too many people. I don't see the president as an evil or a bad man in any way, but I think he's an ineffectual leader, and I think that view is being accepted more and more, even by the leaders and the intellectual, if you will, the intellectuals of his own party.
Yeah. Well, we had just recently a major leader of the black political community saying if this man was white, we'd be marching on the White House at this point. So he seems to get away with quite a lot. And there's a bit of invert racism here because he is a person of color.
There's no question about it. That was the leader of the Black Caucus. And, of course, the black community voted 95-4 for Barack Obama, which meant John McCain got the same share of the black vote as David Duke, the Klansman, got when he ran for governor of Louisiana. 24-1, he lost it. But, Michael, this is an interesting fact, and I'm going to do the McLaughlin Group today, and I was preparing for it. President Obama got won the black vote, 95% of it. He won 78% of the Jewish vote. He won about 67% of the young people, 18 to 29, and 67% of Hispanics. Now, he's going to win all 4 of those constituencies again, but not by those margins, and he's going to lack the enthusiasm, fire, and energy and belief a lot of those people took to the polls to elect our first black president, and that is his problem, that he doesn't inspire people anymore, and people are starting to tune him out. They're looking at his speeches and they're saying, you know, the speeches, after all, are pretty boring.
Yeah. We just had an election in New York, in a district election, where, now, the Jewish vote there was not perhaps typical. It was heavily Sephardic and Orthodox, but they voted Republican to a large extent. The Catholic vote, and I find this quite fascinating, really turned against the Democrats. Would that be replicated on a national scale in the presidential election?
I think it would. I think one of the hidden issues up there is the governor of New York, Mario Cuomo's son, Andrew. He enacted the gay marriage law up there, rammed it through the legislature, and I think there was a Catholic backlash in that district in Queens and Brooklyn to that law. And despite the fact that if reading the American media that they would say America has really embraced gay marriage, America has not. In 31 state elections so far, gay marriage has been defeated 31 straight times. Normally this is imposed by judges or the elites in the legislature when they control it like they control New York. So I think the traditionalist Catholic conservatives who are older, I think they are very antipathetic to Obama, and I think that Queens district, as you mentioned, the Jewish vote is a different kind of Jewish vote there, and that's a conservative, socially conservative Jewish vote. So I think those are the reasons, but that district is a bad omen for Barack Obama, as is that district in Nevada that he lost, the northern one around Reno. He had run dead even with McCain in that district, and he lost it by, or the Democrats lost it by 22 points.
Mm-hmm. Foreign policy, things have remained pretty much as they were, whichever party's in government. 2 wars, very costly. Money is one thing, but lives of good people is far more important. Will America continue with this policy after the next election?
No, I think America, I have a new book coming out, Michael, and I've got a chapter in it, the second to last, called The Long Retreat. I think America's coming home from the world for among the reasons are those 6,000 dead and 40,000 wounded and trillions of dollars in Afghanistan and Iraq, wars which appear to be leaving us with ashes in our mouths. But secondarily, these monstrous 10% of GDP deficits we're running and a debt 100% of GDP. The Democrats will not touch the entitlement programs. And the other big area is defense. Yep. And I think Republican efforts to defend that are going to be unsuccessful. But candidly, the United States has got to let the Europeans and others start defending themselves. We've carried that hod for 60 years, and I don't think Americans can afford it to carry it any longer.
Is there a president, whatever party, and it could well be a Democrat, you know, it was de Gaulle who got out of French Empire, Macmillan who got out of British Empire. Is there a president who could say, enough is enough, we now change, these are our friends, we love them, they're allies, but we're not going to have our troops either in cold or hot war situations in those regions anymore?
You know, you sound like you read my book, because in the very first part of that chapter, I talk about 1958 when the French had it, and they had lost the war in Indochina, and they had it with the war in Algeria. And a lot of them said, we want to maintain Algeria. So the right, as it were, put de Gaulle in power. And de Gaulle looked at this situation in Algeria and he said, it is gone. And he cut a deal, and Algeria was gone, and he brought France home from these wars. Yep. And he brought home, and he put an end to the empire. And I think that's what we need in America. Now, the problem is, many of the Republicans, I think, all of them almost, except for Ron Paul, are caught in this Cold War paradigm, if you will, the belief that the United States, we're going to bring democracy to the world, we have to fight to defend this, hold and defend that. But the Cold War is over. The Soviet Empire is gone. The Soviet Union is gone. We got American troops on the Elbe River. When all the way from the Bay of Biscay to Moscow, you can drive back and forth now. Yep. So I think a lot of America is still living in the Cold War.
Okay. Now, your next book comes out in 2 or 3 weeks?
2 or 3 weeks. It's called The Suicide of a Superpower. Will America Survive to 2025? And it talks about basically the internal disintegration of the nation, how it is breaking down into racial, political, cultural enclaves, very much in conflict with one another, and how we are coming home from the world.
And you'll come back on the show to discuss that book when it comes out?
Be elated.
Terrific. Thanks for your time, Pat. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Michael.